Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Mr. Dennis. How are you, sir?
I'm okay,
Good, good, good,
as far as I
good.
know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, man.
My goodness.
Have you ever, this is kind of off the subject, but have you ever looked at any kind of, I don't know what the right word is, co-packer or somebody to help you on the production side?
You know, a little bit. I've looked into it and questioned it, and nobody that I have run across yet seems eager to jump into what we're doing. I've got a brand in Thomasville that's not that far from us, about 45 minutes, um, that does it, Chesbro's Confections. And he's suggested I come over and utilize his facility, which would be great. But I've got some qualms even about that. Um, I think if I change the way I do things, it takes away from the story. It takes away from the brand. It takes away, you know what I mean? It's not Opal's recipe and it's not handmade. It's not small batches. It's not. So I'm kind of torn between where I want to go, how much further we want to go. Um, but yeah, I've questioned around, and there wasn't that many people interested in doing it. Um, so I'm kind of betwixt at the minute.
Yeah, I don't know if these guys would be worth talking to or not, but have you heard of a company called Hampton Farms?
I have, yeah. Jack got introduced me. He got me in touch with them, and I was trying to get my nuts through them. But the Spanish nuts that we get, they're getting from the same place I'm getting them out of Texas.
I see.
So I'm like, okay. But anyway, they were trying to connect with them along the lines of what Craig and I are doing with our season nuts, as far trying
Okay.
to get them in state and work with them from there. But yeah, I don't, that conversation never came up with them as if they had any ideas or thoughts on how we could do this on a larger scale.
Okay.
That
I
might
know
be worth
I
it.
know that they have gotten involved in the North Carolina Especially Foods Association this year. They have
Okay.
someone who's on their board who is, I think, in charge of their private label manufacturing.
Mhm.
And I think they have, I don't know if it's a new building, but they do have a building in Raleigh that is an R&D center.
Mhm.
And the North Carolina Especially Foods Association uh, competition that they're having, I guess this spring, that's where they're holding it. So
Okay.
I didn't know if I was just looking on their website, and so they at least have a private label division, but what they do or how they could be of help, I don't know.
Yeah.
Thought
I'll
I
have to
would
do some
mention
check
it.
into that.
Yeah, are you a member of the Especially Food Association?
Yes. Yes, sir.
I would reach out to oh, what's her name? Gosh, Sherry Barefoot.
Terry.
She'll be able to help you, I think, navigate that. But I was struck by the size of their operation. They definitely do business at a large scale, and but I don't know what private label means, and or if it's even relevant. But I thought of you when I saw it. So, hey, everybody, morning. All right. Today we're gonna this is actually a revisit. So some of you may have seen this before, but um, Chad Dickerson is from Greenville, and he was the CEO of Etsy from I think 2013 to 2018, if I remember right. Um, and again, I can't remember exactly the numbers, but he took them from something like 3 million in revenue to like 300 million or some insane number like that. But he is a local Greenville, North Carolina guy. He's very personable. He also has an executive coaching business. So some of you may be interested in that and what he's doing with that. So I thought we would take a look at that, and so hang on, and we'll do it. Maybe.
Well, here we go, Chad, and just
All right.
like I said, feel free to branch off at any point.
All right.
Might be kind of a surprising question, but what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a little kid, what was on your mind?
I wanted to be an architect.
I don't know why it's doing that. Sorry about that.
And honestly, I don't think I really knew what an architect was. But my father, who was actually the the county planner for Pitt County for many years, from 1984 to 2008, as a civil engineer. He and my brother were NC State engineering grads. And so I grew up around my dad's engineering and land surveying office. He was in private practice before he became a Pitt County employee. And he had all these drafting tables and blueprints and like rulers, and he would draw, property, and I helped him survey land and all kinds of stuff. And so somewhere I got in my head that I wanted to be an architect. I think I learned what an architect does probably only in the past few years, because I'm renovating a 1870 brownstone in Brooklyn right now. And I know what an architect does because I get the bills every month. But but I think that kind of reflected some desire to, build things. I didn't know that I was going to end up mostly building software kind of in the cloud and, things that I couldn't really see, but I think it was kind of this idea of building things.
Oh, okay, fantastic. What would you say is the biggest factor that's helped you be successful in your career?
I would say flexibility. Like it's kind of interesting when at the end point, when you're kind of fully formed, as a CEO and took a company public and all that kind of stuff, it's easy to forget the beginning and like how you found your way there. And so even though I ended up working in technology, as a CTO, a chief technology officer before being a CEO, I was that a few times. And my education was important. The path that I took was a really winding path. And so we mentioned Duke a minute ago, but like I went to Duke and I got an English degree. So, much to the chagrin of my father and to some extent my brother, who are engineers. And if you know engineers, they're kind of very proud of being engineers. So I was going to Duke to get this kind of, read a bunch of Shakespeare and get this degree. It's kind of like, what kind of job are you going to get? And I grew up in a very practical family. Like my family didn't have money or connections or anything like that. And so they were kind of like, okay, you can get this English degree, but you have no idea what you're going to do. So, I was talking about flexibility. I didn't know what I was going to do. I graduated from Duke with an English degree, didn't know what I was going to do. And so I actually delivered pizza for like a year after I graduated from college. And I remember my family that was like proud of me for going to a place like Duke. And I went to DH Conley and Pitt County and like graduated #1 in my class and all that stuff. And then suddenly I've graduated from Duke and I'm delivering pizza. And
Perfect.
I think that I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But I was always really interested in journalism and that kind of stuff. And so I was in Raleigh at the time. I went to work at the News and Observer in 1993. I just applied to a one ad for like a clerical job where I was doing filing and data entry and all this kind of stuff. And I just wanted to kind of be around a newsroom. I thought newsrooms are pretty exciting. And I just happened, the job that I did was mostly filing papers in the place where they were building websites, and started asking questions like, what are you doing over there? And they said, oh, I'm doing Unix. Well, like, what's Unix? And they gave me a book and like a login to the Unix system, and I started looking at it. And then they started asking me to do little tasks. And basically I taught myself how to code working at the newspaper. And this is kind of a footnote to history now. People don't remember this, but the News and Observer was the first daily newspaper on the web in the United States. It was ahead of everybody else.
Did not know that.
So it was. So the News Observer was doing incredibly innovative things, and I would say even innovative things for newspapers today. Like they were building online services and selling them like B2B to, you know, they built a database of legislative bills in the North Carolina legislature and sold this searchable database to lobbyists in 1994.
Wow.
And so I taught myself how to code there. And if I'd gone to Duke and said I'm going to major in electrical engineering and I'm going to be an electrical engineer and like I'm going to go on this particular path, I never would have found myself filing papers at the News and Observer. So um, so that uh, I won't tell my whole life story here, but a really interesting thing happened at the News Observer that I think was kind of the real catalyst that got things going. One of my colleagues was interviewing to be the webmaster at the Atlanta newspaper, and webmaster is kind of an old thing. Some of you, if you're over 40, you might remember when they were webmasters. And this was a guy who had a computer science degree from UNC. He went down to interview in Atlanta, and he said, I don't want to move to Atlanta, but I know someone who could do this job. And so he referred me. And I had just delivered my last pizza like 6 or 8 months before, but I was building websites for the first newspaper on the web in the United States. So I was like way ahead of the game. So I went down to Atlanta, and I think it was maybe the first time I'd ever gotten on a plane. Like my family didn't fly anywhere because we're all from North Carolina. Like, why fly to Raleigh from Greenville? And so I flew down to Atlanta, which is a real thrill, and they made me an offer like before I left. And I remember they were like, "What do you need to make?" And I was like, "I'm just going to make up a crazy number." So I made up a crazy number, and they printed an offer letter, and I signed it and flew back to Raleigh. And 6 months after delivering my last pizza, I was running the online operation for the 10th largest paper in the United States, like the #1 paper in the South, and I was 23 years old. So I think none of that would have happened if I hadn't just kind of kept my eyes open, if I wasn't like really flexible in what I did. And even jumping way ahead, joining Etsy, I joined Etsy when it was 40 people and like 6 million in revenue, which is a lot of money in absolute terms, but not a lot for a tech company. And decided, I lived in the Bay Area at the time, and my wife and I decided to kind of take a chance and move to New York. And Etsy didn't look like it was necessarily going to make it. There were a lot of problems in the business and everything. And so I took that chance, and that was probably the most important decision I've made in my life, other than marrying my wife. And that was another case of kind of like scanning the environment, like looking for opportunity, and not being too rigid in what I was trying to do. But yeah, I'm kind of amazed any of it happened. I mean, I grew up in Greenville. Like both my parents like worked on tobacco farms when they were kids. Like we were the first kids who didn't work in tobacco growing up. All my relatives were mostly farmers and kind of simple country people. And then the next thing you're ringing the bell at NASDAQ, and it's like I'm still surprised.
No, that's a thrilling story. Let me ask you, so you got an English degree, and then you ended up on your own, kind of looking into computer related and particularly web related. Do you feel like you had like math ability or engineering ability that or were you intimidated by that kind of stuff? Talk about your skill set, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, so I would say, even though I mostly focused on liberal arts, I had a balanced skill set. Like I took calculus my senior year of high school and did okay, and I was on the math team in 7th grade, and so, but I also enjoyed reading and literature and writing and all that stuff. And I think that one of the things I've learned from a kind of a practical but also educational standpoint, I've met a lot of people who are real successful in the tech industry, and I spent 10 years out in Silicon Valley and 12 years in New York, and a lot of the most kind of brilliant, accomplished people I've met are really balanced in, they're like really good communicators and writers, but they're also kind of technical. And so I think that balance is really important. And then none other than Steve Jobs talked about Apple, and he said that I'm not going to get the exact quote right, but he said that Apple was successful because it was the fusion of technology and liberal arts. And Jobs, a friend of mine worked very closely with Steve Jobs as his assistant for a decade, and he told me that Steve would occasionally kick back, and this is the part of Steve you don't hear about, and he'd kick back and say, you know what, like, kind of tired of running a tech company. Like, I think I might want to go study calligraphy or, like painting or something like that. And so I think
Yeah.
the best products and the best products that I think we all use are kind of the fusion of like great technology with great design and great communication and copywriting and all those things together. So I I've, I I think I got lucky because I spent the first 15 years of my career explaining why I was an English major, and I think the world is starting to catch up with like, oh, okay, like communication design, like all these sort of soft things are becoming important because the internet's become so mainstream that you have to build things that work for normal people and communicate to normal people and all that kind of stuff.
I've not met any normal people lately, I must admit.
Yeah,
what mistakes have you made along the way, would you say? If any?
Oh gosh, do you have 4 hours to even start
I
scratching
do.
the surface?
This is Zoom. We're in Zoom land. Unlimited.
Um, well, I don't think I made a ton of mistakes like early on career-wise, and I think anyone who's been through like any kind of business boom, and the internet was a huge business boom, there's so much opportunity that you can make a lot of mistakes, but if you're around the opportunity, the extent of the opportunity kind of papers over the mistakes you make. And so I think I was in San Francisco during 1999, like the big boom and bust, and I saw all that kind of stuff. But I would say most of the mistakes I've made in business were around like people decisions. Like I hired the wrong person, or I had the person I thought was the right person and they weren't doing well, and I wasn't quick enough to kind of move them out of the job and that kind of thing. And so I think that that's really important. One of the things I'm doing right now is I have an executive coaching practice, so I'm coaching executives right now in 17 different companies, all ranging from Portugal to the Bay Area to New York, like all over the country. And so I think what I just described is kind of a common issue that people have. I think if you're a CEO and executive, to some extent, you have to be an optimist. Like you have to believe that what the plan that you set forth is going to be realized. You have to believe that the people you hire are going to work out because you've advocated and sold them to come to your company. And so I think a lot of CEOs, and I was this way too, struggle a little bit when things don't go well because they believe in people and they believe in the plan. And so that can be a challenge. I think that Etsy, when Etsy went public, and I probably don't want to spend too much time on IPOs, but I made a bunch of mistakes on just some of the mechanics of going public that I could talk about are probably not that interesting to all of you, but just to give one example, is like we decided, and this is something I really believed in, not to provide quarterly guidance to the street, kind of trying to kind of focus people on the longer term. And if you know how Wall Street works, and I learned some of these lessons the hard way, you get like consensus estimates. And if you don't give guidance, then the consensus comes from people coming up with their own estimates, and they may not be the estimates that you want. And so I think I tried to, that's maybe a general category. Like sometimes I tried to do things for kind of noble and thoughtful reasons, but I didn't think about the ramifications of like what that would mean day to day. And so like I'd say the bigger lesson is like always try to balance those things. Like have ethics and beliefs, but also plan out and strategize like what might happen if like your plan doesn't go. Yeah, I could go on about mistakes for a long time.
That's no, I think we all could. Would you talk a little bit about the importance of assembling or putting together a team and how that works from your perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, teams are everything. And to some extent, if you have, uh, a startup of more than one person, which by nature they are, like you're in the realm of teams. And so I think, I'm 48 now, and I've worked in startups, and I've worked in big companies, and I've worked in different geographic regions. But the thing that I've consistently noticed is, if a team is highly functional and there's a high degree of trust in the team, you can do anything. You can get anything done. On the opposite side, if there's a low degree of trust and there's a lot of dysfunction in a team, it's hard to do anything. Um, so I think, looking for finding talent, like attracting talent in the right positions, like in a company, building the right team, knowing, especially in a company like Etsy that scaled pretty much all metrics while I was there, from the time I started to the time I left, went up like 50x, like people, revenue, like everything. You also have to know when someone you really value who's done a really good job is maybe reaching the end of the capabilities, and you have to bring in someone else. So yeah, the team, especially in software companies and kind of knowledge companies, tech companies, the team and the dynamics of the team is really, really everything. It's kind of like sports. Like if you hear about teams that are arguing a lot in the locker room and the coach there's a lot of dissension. It's rare that those teams win championships. I think team is really everything.
Do you find yourself when you're dealing with teams, is this personal referrals or connections? And when you're assembling a team, how do you kind of go about that in a general way?
Yeah, I think that in my experience, if you come into a company that you're not necessarily starting yourself, it is really helpful to bring people in who you trust, because it can be an accelerator. So if you need a really great finance person and you've had a really great CFO, coming into a company and bringing that finance person can be like a real accelerant, assuming that you don't have the right finance person in the company already. But I think it's also important because the function of a team is largely based on having like a strong culture. And any company, even if it's not going well, has good aspects of culture. So I think that you have to really balance bringing in kind of new blood and old blood and that kind of thing. I don't think wholesale replacement of teams is necessarily a good thing. So I think you're always trying to build kind of the right team for the moment, with kind of a little bit of old, a little bit of new. And it's almost a cliche about different perspectives on a team, but I think you really do need different perspectives. And one of the people I enjoy readings, and everything he's written is pretty much a classic, is Peter Drucker. And Drucker talks about decision making and how you shouldn't make a decision until you've had a lot of discussion and dissent. And so the differing viewpoints around a table in a team are really kind of, and that dissent that they create can be the ingredients for some of the best decisions.
Okay. What would you say was the hardest business decision you ever had to make?
I think they've always been around people, and yeah, everything's kind of a distant second after that. So it would be hard to tell you about specific people without naming who they are, but like, and I wouldn't say this is a hard decision. It was kind of an easy decision. It was a hard scenario, but I had a high performing executive who was really well qualified and doing solid work with really unique skills. And I discovered like a harassment issue in the company that was really egregious that this person had perpetuated. And so it wasn't it was actually a very quick decision, did an investigation and that sort of thing. A quick decision, but it was still wrenching because I had to you know, I lost a team member who, from a kind of a tactical standpoint, was making really strong contributions, but I also, you know, it left me with a lot of questions like, you know, how could this happen? And, you know, what else is happening that I don't know about? Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was, again, it was an easy decision, but the circumstances were very difficult.
Okay. Um, can you talk about mentors and influences on you that helped you along the way, maybe starting in school or maybe after?
Sure. So I think, you know, like many people, you know, parents are really important. And I think my dad in particular um, was a really great mentor. And my brother and I, this really blows my mind. My brother and I, like a lot of kids in the 80s, we had a lawn mowing business. And so we would mow lawns around our neighborhood in Greenville. And my dad taught me a lot about business in that scenario. And just to give you a sense of like just how intense that was, you know, we started out with a push lawn mower, and we had one or two lawns, and then we had 5 lawns, and we decided it'd be worthwhile to have a riding lawnmower. And so my brother, my older brother, who lives in Raleigh now, but we went to my dad and we said, hey, could you buy us a riding lawnmower? And he said, no, I can't buy you a riding lawnmower, but I'll loan you the money at prime +2 or something. And I was like 8 years old. And I didn't even know what interest really was. And so I asked my dad, like, what's interest? And he kind of explained it to me. And then I said, well, what's prime? And he said, well, you know, go turn to page 8 of the Daily Reflector and like look on the, you know, the stock quote page. And there's a little box that tells you what the prime rate is. And so, you know, so my dad took his Sears credit card, and, you know, interest rates back then were like, you know, 17, 18%. It was like high interest rate time. And my brother and I basically we got paid pretty much all in cash. We would give my dad cash at the end of the month, like whatever it was. And so after, I think, a year, we had paid back the lawnmower. And so that really taught me the value, not of like of just of money, but like how business works. You
Yeah.
know, you take a risk, you borrow money to expand, you pay it back, then you decide whether to expand again. So you know, things like that are really important. And then like one last note on my dad is probably when I was 10 years old, like around early April, late March, he asked me if I'd paid my taxes yet. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't pay taxes. And he gave me, I don't know if we ever actually filed this, but he gave my brother and me 1040 EZs and made us like count up all of the money we had made and like fill out the form. And I don't know, he probably put it in a shredder after we did it, but I really appreciate that. And I think even when I was running a public company and like thinking about like whether to invest money here or there, like it's the same principle. And so to learn that when you're 8 years old was really remarkable. Another person that was really inspiring, I work for a company called IDG, which people have either heard of, or they're just kind of like, what's that? International Data Group. And so in its heyday, we were publishing all the dummies computer books and like Macworld and Network World and InfoWorld. And so the founder of that company was Pat McGovern, passed away maybe 5 years ago. But you know, Pat basically started the modern computer magazine. And so he and built the company, and it was a closely held company. I think he held 90% of it, you know, when he passed away. And, you know, I'd go to board meetings for the property that I work for. I work for InfoWorld magazine, the enterprise tech magazine. And I remember we would run events for CTOs and CIOs and kind of tech executives. And we would report, you know, we haven't sold that many tickets to the event. And, you know, the tickets are $500. And Pat would tell us, like, the reason you're not selling enough tickets is because you need to raise the price. Which was counterintuitive. And he said, you know, if I'm a CIO and I'm flipping through the magazine and I see that there's a conference in San Francisco and it costs $500, I'm going to think it's not really worth much. But if it's $2,000, I'm going to think, yeah, there are going to be some real players and heavy hitters at this conference. Like that's a good conference, and he was always right, and a very good businessman, and also so aside from being a great businessman, he taught me about the value of people. Kind of when I was there, IDG had companies, I think in 30 or 40 countries, and every year, thousands of employees. Pat, and he did this year round. He would go to every office, and in the United States, he would around Christmas, he would come walking around with the managers, and he would, for every person in the entire global company, he would say, I heard that you did a good job on, this very specific thing. And then he would ask you in front of your manager, like how your manager was doing. And everyone loved it and hated it at the same time. And so that really taught me that you could be like a really successful businessman, but also like really take time for people. And it was like very genuine. And he did it for, gosh, 40 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So I just really appreciated that personal touch. And occasionally he had this paper that had like a rainbow on it and it said good news. You would get what looked like a hand typed letter from Pat saying like, because I wrote a column for InfoWorld, and it would say, I read your column on, last week in the magazine, and I really like this point you made.
Wow.
And so, after multiple moves and many years and many things, I still have those letters from Pat that I keep with me. So I do think that you can combine like a really strong business head with actually really caring for people and taking care of people. And so Pat taught me that, and I saw that in my dad too, and kind of the work that he did.
It's a fantastic. If you could start all over again, would you do anything differently than you did?
I actually don't think so. Yeah, I really don't think so. I don't, when I hear that question, the thing that I think is I don't know that I could have this run of luck again. Like, I mean, and I think that one of the things I've realized is like, you have to be ready for luck. Like you have to see it and you have to pursue it. So like everything isn't just luck. But in a lot of ways, there is luck. And so just to give you a very quick example, like I decided to graduate from Duke a semester early because I was on financial aid and it's really expensive. And so I graduated in December 93 instead of May of 94. And so I decided, because I needed a job, that's when I ended up at the News Observer and I was delivering pizza. I was doing both of those at the same time. And Mosaic, the first kind of commercial web browser, or at least for regular people, came out in March of 1994, like while I was at the News Observer. So had I decided to do my last semester at Duke, I would have graduated in May, and the internet started between December and May. I would have been in school. And to be at the first newspaper in the United States at the moment that the kind of modern internet was born, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't been there.
Isn't that something?
at that moment.
Did you meet
Yeah.
Mark Andreessen at that point or later on?
I didn't meet Mark Andreessen then, but I met him later. And, we pitched his venture firm. They didn't ultimately fund us, but, one of the people who worked for me at Yahoo was a guy, when I was working at the News Observer, a guy named, well, years later, I worked with him, but when I worked at the News Observer, like you'd get a not found page and you get the error page for NCSA HTTPD, the web server, and it would have his email. His name was Rob McCool. Like I'd never forget Rob McCool's name.
Great name.
Yeah, and it almost sounded like it wasn't a real person. And then when I went to work at Yahoo, Rob McCool worked there, and I got to know Rob McCool. And I said, Rob, like I used to see your name on those error pages, and I feel like I'm, like your royalty in some way. And so, so that was really neat. So yeah, I don't think I would change anything. And yeah, I just feel super lucky because growing up in Greenville, like I I didn't even know anybody who lived outside of North Carolina. Like it was everything. It was like those old maps where there are dragons on the edge of the earth, like, and you would sail off into like, that was how I saw the border of North Carolina. Like that was where the dragons on the map were. Like it was just places that I never thought I would go. You know, my grandfather on my father's side had never been out of North Carolina, and my family, we went on a family trip and drove my grandfather and grandmother into Tennessee. And I'll never forget, we drove over the border of Tennessee, and my grandfather immediately kind of whipped his neck back and looked back at North Carolina. And he was a guy who wore overalls and, you know, farmer, and he said, you know what? Doesn't feel too different. Feels kind of the same. And so that was the environment I grew up in. So to have done what I've done, I feel really, really fortunate, and, you know, and have a great, happy family and all that stuff. So yeah.
Great accomplishment there. Let's switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to make you put your prognosticator hat on, or future. Can you talk a little bit? One of the things that we're dealing with is, you know, small businesses. We're far away from any kind of tech center. I guess you could say Raleigh is, but we're 100 miles from there. So do you have any thoughts about, particularly about e-commerce and small businesses, and kind of the opportunity that you see at this point?
Absolutely. And one thing I would mention, I think I don't know if I met you there, Dennis. Maybe I did. I may have met some other of you there, like in I think it was April 2018. I spoke at the NC East Alliance meeting.
Yeah, with John Chafee. Yeah, he's
Right.
one of our mentors also.
Got it. And so I posted this on my blog. I did a presentation called Technology, I think it was Technology, Local Economy, and Craft Economies, or something like that. But I could send that to you if you had any trouble finding it. And I talked about this a little bit there. But I think what I don't think people around the whole country and really around the world have caught up with mentally is that no matter where you are, you have access, especially with the cloud, to the exact same tools that anybody has in Silicon Valley or New York or Atlanta or like anywhere, Austin. Like no difference at all. It's not even a little bit of difference. And so I think, and then I look at a city like Wilson, North Carolina, and they've got the fastest internet in the world. Like there's no difference with their broadband that they've built. You know, it's just as fast as somebody in Singapore or Taiwan or San Francisco or whatever. Better than San Francisco, because I've lived there, and surprisingly the internet's not good there.
Yeah, in some of those neighborhoods, you're right.
So I think, and I had to learn this too, like I think that some of it's kind of embracing that mentality, kind of knowing that you have as much access to technology and infrastructure as anyone else, and customers. So if you're in an e-commerce business, like you can reach buyers all around the world and all around the country just as easily as anyone in like a big metro area. So I think it's almost like having the confidence of knowing that even though you live in a place that maybe isn't as populated as one of the population centers, you have the same tools that everyone else has. So I think, especially with the pandemic, I mean, I'm not saying anything particularly that someone hasn't said before, but I think, people are kind of we're already distributing out from the cities and are now distributing out a bit more. So I could imagine, when I was in Greenville, like the big company in Greenville at the time was Burroughs Wellcome. And so, and local governments are always trying to attract, big companies and give big tax breaks and all that kind of thing. I think that sort of government and civic leaders kind of shift their mindset and start thinking about like, how do we attract lots of, small businesses? Like, what if instead of, and I know Burroughs Wellcome is like super dated, that probably happened in the 70s or 80s, but instead of Burroughs Wellcome, like what if you were able to create an environment where, 10,000 Etsy sellers wanted to come live in Greenville? Another example that actually I talked to John Chafee about a lot, he kind of educated me on this, like the brewing industry. There was I think a Coors Miller brewer in Eden, North Carolina, that was kind of the main employer in Eden. And when it went away and they closed the plant, it really hurt that area because they were so dependent on this one brewer. And so if you look at a city like Asheville, I've lost count, but I think they have something like 35 brewers in the country. And I actually in the city, I did the math and I looked at like how many people were employed at this Eden brewery that went completely away when they shut down, and then how many people were employed in the Asheville breweries, which had, I think, a guaranteed minimum wage and all kinds of stuff. And the economic impact of, the 35 breweries in Asheville was higher than the one, and it was also a lot more resilient from an economic perspective. And so I think
that makes sense.
Just thinking about like individually and collectively, thinking about, wherever you are, the things that drive the economy can be.
Okay, that's some interesting stuff. I wanted to point out a couple of things that I found interesting that maybe you will also.
Here is an answer from an Alexa Answers contributor that I translated.
Alexa, stop. Anyway.
Sorry, I can't control music from the audio cable,
I can
but I
turn.
have silence line in.
All right. Thank you, Alexa. One of the things that I struggle with in my role here is really, trying to help rural areas and people in rural areas be more competitive, if you will, in business. And I don't know if you caught this, but one of the things he talked about was how carefully his father worked with him. He was 8 years old when he got his first lesson on finance and buying equipment. I don't know about you guys, but when I was 8, I don't remember being alive, let alone get lessons on how to finance a lawnmower. He also talked about his dad handing him the tax forms. This sort of guidance is really lacking in a lot of rural areas. It's probably lacking everywhere, but it's very interesting. You see the outcomes of people who have had the benefit of that kind of attention and experience at a very young age. I have a real good friend who is he's a real interesting guy, but if you met him, you would think that you wouldn't necessarily think he's a special needs person, but he's 5'3", and he's just a funny guy. But anyway, it turns out that his grandfather was the Mercedes-Benz distributor for the country of Argentina. So this guy has forgotten more stuff than I know. He has so many things that he knows and experiences that he has synthesized. He ended up graduating both Harvard undergraduate and Harvard Business School. And he has such a background that when presented with something in business, I've worked with him a couple of different times. He has this wealth of things that he can think about and consider as solution to problems that most people don't even understand how to frame the question, let alone answer it. So it's just like sports. Lots of times you've probably seen Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback for Kansas City. I didn't know this, but his father was a Major League Baseball player. He grew up in a Major League Baseball clubhouse with his father, who played for the Milwaukee Brewers and others. So my point, I guess, is don't underestimate your ability to influence others. You don't necessarily it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be, a really big deal, but you guys know a lot and you've learned a lot and you've made mistakes. And just like this guy was talking about, I think that you can really benefit your community and even your family if you take time every once in a while to throw out some of these learnings or expose some of these learnings, because that really is what's missing in a lot of rural areas. There's a lot of stuff about farming. I think there are people who, grew up on farms and they have an understanding of all of that. But if you're not going into farming, if you're actually going into, like this guy, technology, where's your base of knowledge coming from? It can't just be school. It can't just be taught. But it's this personal kind of awareness and connection with of how to think, and you can really make a big contribution to your area and to yourself by having this awareness and taking the opportunity every once in a while to lend a hand to somebody who could benefit, however small it might seem. With that being said, the rest of this video is available on our site, on their YouTube page. You'll be able to see it. If there's not a lot more on it, but I'm curious if anybody was struck by anything that they heard today that made them think about what they're doing. Anyone?
The story about his dad made me think, wow, I didn't do enough. What
over.
an amazing lesson to be teaching your children, I tell you.
Yeah, I agree. And he didn't really say, but I'm curious about how old his brother is. Is he a lot older than him? You know, kind of this intermediate between the father and him, or are they about the same age? I would be interested in knowing that. I think that makes a difference. I grew up with an older brother. He's 7 years older than me. And, you know, realistically, in my mind, it was, I don't want to say he was like a father, because he wasn't. He was mean as shit. But his age and his experience was just right for certain things that I learned and examples he set and so forth, all related to sports, as it turned out. But that is it isn't too late. Just remember that. Anyone else want to comment?
Hey everyone, I'll just share. Thanks for sharing that interview, Dennis. It's Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
I think what I was just struck by is that he's just a regular person. Like, we're all just regular people. And, you know, he's the founder of a publicly traded company. And there's differences among all of us, but we all have it in us if that's what we want to do. And I think, you know, sometimes I'll hear like CEOs of publicly traded companies on Yahoo Finance or something, and they seem like maybe a different breed of person, but like, we're all just human and all those skills can be developed, like public speaking. So that's what struck me.
Yeah, I think those are good observations. And you know, I think one of the things I've learned, and I know a lot of CEOs and a lot of successful business people, but a lot of it is really, I'm not going to use the word training, but exposure, right? Like, this guy, you know, he was delivering pizzas. I went to Duke delivering pizzas, gets a job, and it just works out with him, right? He's an English major, and he's obviously an exceptional guy. Don't get me wrong. I understand that, but still, you know, he kind of saw what was happening and he learned the ropes, really, of that space. And we all have to learn the ropes of the space we're in, right? And you have to seek out ways to connect. Maybe there are people who are aspirational to you or feel like they're in a space that you would like to get to. Don't hesitate to reach out. I have found particularly the really successful ones are so easy to talk to, and they love it when somebody, particularly if you play up, I know this sounds trite, but if you play up, look, I'm a small business, I'm woman owned, I'm minority, I'm from rural area, and, you know, all that stuff plays. Set your tone with this conversation, with this connection. What is it that you want from this person so that they can respond? You know, if you got to help them, you know, how can they help you? And I think some of the stuff, like the questions I was asking Chad, were really intended to expose the choices that he made and why he did what he did and what were the influences on him. And that was the goal of that whole interaction with him. And he is very personable. One thing I will say that's really hard to get your arms around, and I learned this in a number of ways, but one of the things about CEOs, particularly of bigger organizations or successful organizations, their primary focus is that organization. It's not themselves. It's not about them. Sometimes they're maniacs, I understand, but in general, they're about the organization. That's what they're really focused on. And you heard him say one of the most difficult times for him was he had this talented executive that he had to get rid of because the executive was doing weird stuff, right? But the reason he felt that way is because he put the organization first. He didn't put himself first. Boy, my life's gonna be a lot harder without this talented guy doing his job. He just thought, this guy's got to go. This is bad for the organization. So that's a mindset that's sometimes very difficult for what I'm going to call individual contributors or people who work by themselves a lot, or they're doing something by themselves. They forget that what you're trying to do is create its own thing. It's an entity. It has its own value, totally separate from you. And that's a really important thing to think about in terms of brand building, your positioning, how you think about your business. Think about the entity, not just yourself. And it's a really hard lesson for small business people, to figure that out, in my experience. So that's enough pontificating. Anyone else want to jump in with what Hi, Shabna. How are you? Good to see you.
Hi, I was able to make it today.
Yay.
So I just wanted to say that I liked the part about he was talking about team building, but I would like to actually get a little more details about, like, how does he really deal with all these the hurdles that comes with team building. It's so, I think, like, one thing that really pulls me down is actually that process of team building, as in, like, it mentally affects me. I started going to therapy for personal reasons, but by the time I started going for my first time itself, my whole session became about actually people I hire. Like, the
Right.
first few times that I went to my therapist, it was me talking about my employees rather than actually about my personal issues.
Yeah.
It was affecting me so personally on a very personal level that, and I'm still struggling with it, like, how, especially because of what the environment is now with, everyone's struggling to hire. So it's just gotten even more difficult. So I'd like to know, how is it that all these businesses, all these people, dealt with it? I'm sure I'm not the first person to experience all this, but I'd like to know those who dealt with it, how they dealt with it.
Well, I think, and please, I don't want to monopolize this, but this is exactly my point about, what's good for the entity versus what's good for you. And if you put yourself in a position where you are representing the entity versus yourself, you may find you have a different emotional perspective as you build your team. It's not about you. It's not about them pleasing you or doing the things that you're capable of doing. It's really about the entity. And so that's really all I'll say about that. Lisa, do you want to jump in on that?
I was thinking the exact same thing. It's like she and I were, but it's been a chore to find the right people. And I just finished I was in Vegas at the GrowthCon, 10X GrowthCon. Before that, the Sunday before I left, I submitted my last homework for the Unbreakable Business Program through Grant Cardone. And before that, I had done his Unbreakable Business Challenge. He had celebrities, business owners, people from all over who are successful on all these different, the Unbreakable Challenge, the Unbreakable Business Program, and then at GrowthCon. And the message that every last one of them said was that you cannot grow your business on your own, that you have to get a great team. They have, you have to build a great team. You can't do it on your own, which is what I've been doing. I of course, I have team members who work for me and a manager or whatever, but it's mainly me doing everything. And I need to hire a personal assistant, and I need to have people who are in leadership that can help me grow my business. And where do you all advertise for those jobs? Because I haven't been getting quality people. And a lot of people say it's the it's the managers or owners' fault if the team isn't good, but that's not always the case. Like I can have a lot of good people and team members and one poison person, which I did last year, who was poisoning the whole bunch. And I ended up getting rid of her, but she had done a lot of damage before I did.
Yeah, I think, this is, if you remember in the beginning of the conversation, what Chad said was the team is everything, right? And so I think it's something that is beyond my ability just to kind of quickly say this, but I think that your vision and how you're going to go about it is what's going to attract people who want to buy into that vision or who share that vision. I think that's a really important piece. I think that as you develop that clarity of purpose and you can communicate that both emotionally and technically and content, I think the universities are a place for that. There are a number of programs, even programs you don't necessarily have to end. It could just be a meetup. It could be like UNC Chapel Hill has a really extensive launch program. I don't even know what it's called, Launch Chapel Hill, I think. There's just so many programs like that. And you'll find if you get involved with that kind of stuff, you will meet kindred souls, people who are thinking like you, people who want to go where you're going. But it's incumbent upon you, Shavna talked about going to a therapist. It's incumbent upon you to package the message and package the story so that it can be heard by people that need to hear it, right? So that really is on you as a CEO, as a founder, to really, accurately and in a quality way, communicate your vision and how you're going to get there and find people who are like-minded, if you will, and getting yourself in places where these kinds of people congregate is the first order of business. And my instinct around here is, at the universities that have active communities that you can participate in, even if it's just going to a seminar or going to a program, you will meet people there and they can help you. And they'll be relatively local, right? Though the fact that they're physically there tells you that they're probably nearby. So that would be my suggestion for helping build a team. But I'm sure this is something we can visit in much more detail. And also I want to point out, when you hear about the pay and salary of CEOs and other business leaders, you go, oh my God, that woman is making 30 million a year, whatever it is. The reason is it's kind of like being Michael Jordan, right? You are really good. If you can build that kind of organization or lead that kind of organization, you are worth a lot of money. It's really hard. We're all sitting here saying the same thing. So, don't underestimate the amount of effort that it's going to take to do that. And a lot of it does start with you and what your vision is and what the game plan that you're selling. Is it big enough to hold more than just you? Is it big enough to attract people who share your vision and the problem that you're trying to solve? That's really the key. And I don't think it's a matter of, I think it's not so much a matter of advertising as it is connecting and building your network in an effective way and finding the places to do that. I don't think you're going to find it at a chamber of commerce, for example. I don't think you're going to find it. I think you need to find it in a place where people are really interested in doing big things. And to me, it's always been the university environment that I've seen that more than most places. So that's my 2 cents. Okay. Well, thank you all today. This was good. And I tried to get Chad back again live. It's really hard. He's a busy guy. As he said, I think he's got maybe 50 coaching clients at this point that he helps all over the country. So I will point out that Chad was fired by Etsy for poor performance, if you can believe that. He took it from 2 or 4 million up to, I think it was 400 million in sales, and he got fired. And the person that runs Etsy now has taken it way over $1 billion. So, and now Etsy is truly a global colossus. So as good as Chad was and is, he still ran into the buzzsaw. So there's no guarantees. I'm not trying to put him on a pedestal or take him off his pedestal. I think he's a great guy, and he's obviously a thoughtful person. But at the same time, when you have outside investors, the other side of it, people say, well, how do I get investment? I got news for you. These are not nice people from the point of view. They're not your friends. You're taking money and you have to deliver results. And when you don't deliver results, you're going to be gone. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. So keep that in mind too. There's a price to pay for everything. So,
Dennis,
yes,
are you familiar with the brand Miyoko's?
one more time.
Are you familiar with the brand Miyoko's?
No.
Anyone? Oh, it's a really big vegan brand. They do like vegan butters and cheeses. It's pretty huge. And I've been following Miyoko's story. The founder's name is Miyoko, and that's the brand name. And she was just fired. And she built this company up. I mean, she's like I really respect her and what she's done. And she's like very vocal about, building plant-based industries and saving the planet. And I just follow her on LinkedIn. If anyone's interested, I don't know. You brought up the topic of like founders being fired. So yeah. I think it's a really interesting case study, and she's actually being sued now. And the board apparently, she quoted them. They said, you've taken the company from 0 to 1, and now we need to go from 1 to 100, right? With different leadership. And I think we hear that a lot. And to me, what it says is like, the importance of growing and changing and learning and honing in our skills every step of the way. Like it's like we have to develop a different set of skills for, to get to 100,000, to get to 1 million, to get to 10 million in revenue. Like it's continuous learning. And then I guess there comes a point where maybe we do decide to make room for another CEO, or maybe the choice becomes like not even ours. So right. I just thought that would be an interesting topic.
Okay, I'll look that up. I'll tell you all a quick story. So a friend of mine, the same guy, in fact, I was just telling you about, the 5'3" guy, his wife, so he's Jewish and she's Muslim. They've been married for 40 years. They're really an amazing couple. But what she does and has done for the last 15 years is she is hired by venture capital funds to go into companies that are not doing what they should be doing. And she comes in as the CEO and replaces founders all the time. I mean, this is what she does. And it's always because they have stalled or they're failing or who knows, any number of reasons. But it's a reality of investors, outside investors, particularly if it's a formal venture capital fund. These folks have no choice. They have got to deliver results to their investors. They're not in there running the business, right? They're finance guys. They're people who invest, and then they hope they'll give you whatever you need, they feel you need to achieve your business goals, but they're really not your friend. That's not what it's about. They don't need more friends. And if you have a portfolio of 50 companies and 10 of those 50 are about to go out of business, that's a huge hit. And it happens all the time. They call them zombie companies. There's a lot of zombie companies out there that they're in existence, but they're not going anywhere. They're stalled. And so just be aware of that. And I think Sarah's point about evolving, it's not always choice. It's always, what is the deal that you've made? What is the bargain that you've made? Whether it's an investor, whether it's with yourself, whatever it is, it's why it's really important to think big and to act big, not necessarily global. I'm not saying everyone has to be a global brand, but you need to have some headspace to actually reach your potential, right? You may have a real clear vision of something, and because of your background and your experience, you're missing a real obvious, ramp, a real obvious ramp that somebody who's done this 10 or 11 times before can come and go, shit, how come you're not doing X? Because they've seen it work, right? So it's a challenge to your ego, especially if you're a strong, powerful kind of personality. The reason you're where you are today is because you are strong and powerful, believe it or not. I know you don't feel that way every day, but you are. So taking it, you've had a lot of obstacles to overcome to even get to where you are, but it never stops. The goalposts keep getting moved. It's just the nature of business. And it's, it's just the way it is. I wish it wasn't, but that's the way it is.
Dennis, your friend's wife might be a good resource for us to talk to look at our business or to ask questions and see where we're going wrong or what we can improve on.
Yeah, she is. She's listed on our website as a mentor. So if you want to talk to her, you can let me know. She's not going to do like individual consulting. She doesn't have time. She just got a new gig like 2 weeks ago, and but she's certainly willing to talk, and maybe we can have her be a guest speaker, or you can get in some kind of email relationship with her. But she is really, really busy, as are a lot of people like that. But if you look at our list of mentors on our website, you'll see a bunch of people. I have a lot of women, senior people that have expressed willingness to help. And if there is somebody on there that you want to talk to, just let me know, and I'll do what I can.
And what's her name?
One point I do want to make about, and it's next Wednesday. Our class is going to start at 11 instead of 10. But don't miss it. Okay, this is Andy Galinsky, who was the executive who bought Burt's Bees for Clorox. He was the lead guy, but his experience and his background is he is a consumer products good expert. He has launched dozens of brands that you have heard of before. He's worked for a bunch of companies, Procter & Gamble, Gillette, you name it. He's worked for them all. He's a wonderfully warm, connected guy. He'd love to talk to you all and help you any way he can, and not extensively, but he can say, hey, I think your packaging's, could use an uplift or whatever. He's that kind of guy. But I really strongly recommend you attend next Wednesday's class, and he'll have a presentation, which I'll share with everybody. But he really is fabulous. And to get a guy like that who's had that kind of background and give us these insights in building our brand is really a rare treat. So I do want to highlight that as coming up. The rest of this week, we're going to have a woman who's a North Carolina farmer who has gotten a lot of recognition as a speaker, and some of the stuff that her and her husband have done on their farm going direct to consumer, with a real surprise ending to that. I think you all will get a kick out of. I'm just trying to look real quick and see what else we got this week. And then on Thursday, I don't know if any of you ever heard of Pebble. It was a watch that was popular kind of before the Apple Watch came out, Pebble Watch. The founder of that is going to give a talk about how to talk to customers and users. He calls them users, but I think you all will enjoy that as well. And so that's from Y Combinator, if you're familiar with that group. So we're going to have some presentations from Y Combinator that hopefully will be helpful to you. Any questions or anything anybody want me to cover?
I was just going to say, anyone in the group, you might can find the AI email snatcher in any company that you like. Snatch the email, it'll give you the title of their job description and their email, and then go into LinkedIn and look for those type of people for the jobs you're looking for within your company. It's an AI that does that. It's an AI bot.
Well, what's that? Do you know the name of the app? Is that?
I don't, but I will get it. It's on my other computer and I'll at the office, and I'll put it in the group.
That'd be great. All right. Okay. Well, that's all, folks.